Did you know AAC, Advanced Aquarium Consultancy in England, is the UK's premier retail reef shop and is this year's host of Coral Freaks 2024? Paul Hughes, an advanced hobbyist with many years of experience and the owner of this fantastic store, will share his journey on how AAC became the shop everyone wants to visit. Join me as we welcome Paul, a true expert in his field, on VargasReef Chronicles right after this. You have to love reefing.
Welcome everyone to VargasReef Chronicles. Here we are again in a beautiful interview. We're having our coffee and talking reefing. And as most of you are aware, I came to England in order to do a little mini conference that we had here. And Paul graciously invited me. But the most important thing that I wanted to accomplish was to have this interview with Paul. Paul's been in the industry a very, very long time. We've known each other, how long?
10 years?
No,
Probably.
it's more
Maybe
than
longer.
that.
Maybe
Yeah,
longer.
a little bit longer than
I'm
that.
probably the wrong person to ask about dates and times. I'll just forget everything. But yeah.
Okay, so that taken into consideration, we've known each other a long time. He's seen some hysterical moments between myself and David Saxby.
Absolutely.
But more importantly, we're going to learn a lot about the industry and his philosophy on how he runs this gorgeous tank behind us. And we'll do some clips on that as well. We'll take a tour through the shop. So before we go there, Paul, thank you for inviting me over to the conference. I really appreciate it. I had a great time. I think the audience there had a great time. How are you doing now that it's finally over?
I'd say that I'm feeling a lot better. I had a lot of anxiety about it because it wasn't really so much a conference as so much as a new format, like a chat show thing, and some people were doubting whether it would be very successful or not, but I think we proved that it would be. I think the idea of a new format, I think, worked quite well, don't you? I think
it worked well. However, I noticed that it was a whole different concept. And I often wondered after we did it, why this was never thought of before, and how did you think about this concept? Where did it all come from?
Right, well, I think what it was is as much as me and you enjoy talks, like scientific and structured talks, that's something that us old reefers do. Today's modern sort of Instagram style scrolling and things, attention spans are shorter. So I thought, so how do you keep it interesting? How do you keep it light-hearted? And also, sometimes those conference or proper talks, they perhaps go beyond some people's abilities or reef-keeping knowledge. And I wanted to include everyone. I wanted the idea that someone who's only just started would find it interesting. So as much as they would find a structured or scientific talk interesting, say, a few years into the hobby, there's a lot of new reefers out there that perhaps it would have been unachievable. So if we were talking about plankton, for example, we might bore them after 20 minutes. But this whole idea was to
I think you bored them before that.
Yeah, was more inclusive. I wanted everyone to feel like they could be part of it at any level of their reef-keeping ability. So it was really about breaking down a talk into something that was accessible by everyone.
Right.
And the chat show formula, everyone loves a chat show, right? No matter how old you are, everyone loves them, whether it's like I think in America you have the Jay Leno show.
Jay Leno, the Tonight Show.
Yeah, and over here we have Jonathan Ross or Graham Norton.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So I thought, well, let's do it that way. Let's not make it. Let's make it more light-hearted, less scientific. I mean, one of the fellow guests I know you spent some time with, Jamie Craggs, for example, was a scientist.
Yes.
Yeah. But I said to Jamie, I literally said to Jamie, I said, how do I knock the scientist out for you for the day on the phone? I said, I don't want you to be too scientific. I wanted it, just to flow, and that's why I said to you as we started the show, let Jeremy Jeremy Gay, Reef Builders, who was fantastic.
Amazing. He did such a great job.
So, just let Jeremy guide the questions. And we wanted to try and keep them very light-hearted and humorous and also bring some level of education into it, but not so stuffy as previous talks have been done and so forth. You know.
So, I'm trying to picture you. You're either driving in your car on your way home, or you're in bed looking up at the ceiling saying, it's 2:30 in the morning and I can't go to sleep.
Yeah, that's true.
What was it that ignited the, this is a great idea?
Coral Freaks 1 2019 was a first stab at something which is very sort of second nature for Americans. Like, so for example, they have vendor shows all the time, the Reef Paloozas and all these other little small shows on California, Steve Tyree, the Coral Farmers Market, and people like that. And I thought, well, in 2019, with a lot more energy, so you think, 5 years ago or so ago, I did this vendor show. But vendor shows are fraught with peril. They have lots of stress and anxiety, more anxiety, because you're worrying about things like electrics and water and livestock, and they're very stressful things to pull off, as I learnt in 2019. And there's been an appetite for a Coral Freaks 2 for years, but of course, COVID hit, and that ruined the idea. And then now Paul Longhurst, who you met, who shares it. He
really nice guy.
Yeah, really nice guy. He went off to, instead of me doing Coral Freaks, he done Love to Reef, which is in the same place, but now Paul does that. He's a hobbyist. He's got more time, hasn't got shops and livestock everywhere. So I let Paul take it on. So I thought, if I'm going to come back with Coral Freaks 2, let's make it light-hearted, but less stressful as well. There's only so much time that I have with everything I've got going on to be able to do it. So that was the moment. The moment was, well, how do I do Coral Freaks again? I don't want to do another vendor show. We have one in May.
Right.
So I thought, how do we bridge the gap between October, which is when Coral Freaks always fell, hence the freaky writing for Coral Freaks. It was around Halloween sort of time.
Yes.
So the idea being that was really the motivation to do this chat show style. Take the stress out of it, and also take the stress out of it for the speakers.
You took the stress away from the speaker having to worry about. But what was interesting was we had no idea. Well, I didn't. I know me, myself, I had no idea what the questions were that were coming.
Yeah.
So it was a big surprise to me what was coming and what was going to be said.
I mean, credit to Jeremy. I mean, me and him sat down for weeks leading up to this, and I said to him, keep the questions really simple. Like for Than Thien, reefing's best dressed man.
Absolutely.
The number one.
He needs an award for that, man.
The number one question was, in so many words, was, do you wear your suit when you're fragging corals? You know, and that's what I mean.
Humorous questions.
Light-hearted, but at the same time, we also did have some very in-depth conversations with Jamie Craggs as well about the way that we see the hobby going forward and serious stuff, but we tried to blend it with the humorous stuff as well.
Yes.
And of course, there was another really special thing, which Jeremy mentioned as well. It was actually his idea, this part of the show, which was, we often us in the UK and in Europe, we're looking at the US, and you have like an award for like the best aquarist of the year and things like that. And Jeremy was very keen to, we've got some great British reef keepers, which I know you've met a few, but I know quite a bit of your audience, probably perhaps American audience, wouldn't realise how many great people in the UK grow a reef.
But they will now.
Absolutely,
They will now.
Yeah,
sure.
So David Saxby receives the award as the Aquarist and Lifetime Achievement Award, and I wanted you, that's why you was here, to basically, to bring some jazz to the show, but also your long-term standing friend David Saxby. I wanted you two back in the room again together and to present that award.
That was, I'll be honest with you, that was the highlight. But I did feel pressure because when, and it's interesting, I knew that there was something leading up, but I had no idea exactly what it was because Paul wouldn't divulge that information to me. I knew David. I thought, in all honesty, I thought I was going to present David with a cake because it was his 80th birthday.
Well, at first we was going to do that.
So
but
that's what I thought I was going to do. And then the night before the show, I hear, well, we're going to give him this and you're going to present it. And I'm like, huh? Like,
I knew you'd be fine with it.
Yeah, he knew I'd be fine. Meanwhile, I'm up till 2 o'clock in the morning thinking, how do I verbalize this to, number one, first of all, first and foremost, how do you verbalize something to someone who has everything?
Yeah, true.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you verbalize something to someone who has literally anything his heart desires?
Well, I think you summed it up really well. Your words, which I can still remember now, is that I remember you saying that David Saxby, you won't find him on Facebook. You are not going to find him on Instagram. You're not going to. Yet everybody in the world, wherever you've travelled, you mentioned China, you mentioned Australia. You know, and this guy, wherever you go, everyone knows who he is. But he doesn't have a true. I mean, yes, his company shares images and things, but ultimately, he's beaten the internet. He's beaten the Instagram. He's beaten Facebook. Most of us spend a lot of time on our social profiles, trying to get our name out there,
right? Our branding.
But
this man
don't need it.
No, and how I phrased it was, and it's funny because it finally hit me about 2:30 in the morning. How does one man beat the media?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's an interesting question. How does one man beat the media? And David Saxby is an example of that because David has no internet presence. I mean, he's out there, but he's not, right? The David himself is not out there on the internet. However, everyone around the world knows him.
I'll tell you what was the most special moment, though, as I'm sure anyone who came to Coral Freaks 2024 will remember, was there. It's very rarely that you'll ever see David emotional. And he definitely had a tear in his eye, didn't he? He really touched him. In fact, so much so that he rang you the next day and he had you go and visit him that day, and then he rang you the next day and he's still thriving off of it now. But he was so emotional, wasn't
he? And he said to me, he said it was the most emotional he's ever been.
Yeah.
Because receiving an award, you know, when you receive an award of that caliber, you're being acknowledged by the community as the man who actually achieved more than most others. The audience was so receptive. When something funny was said, you had everyone hysterical laughing.
Yeah.
Which means that they were all paying attention.
Yeah.
And this is the point that I found interesting with the show, because this was about the panel that was up there, and the audience was given the opportunity to be part of the show.
And the Q&A. That
was funny, because you're running all over the place with the mic.
But that was quite a part of it, wasn't it? That was quite funny. But I think David actually made a suggestion. He said that if there is a Coral Freaks 3, we should look at the idea of doing just the whole afternoon as the Q&A. Because we had no idea, did we, how popular that was going to be.
You know, and I thought at some point I would have to shout in the mic, don't be shy, ask your question.
That's usually what the UK audience can be like. The UK audience can be like that.
I think there's an evolutionary situation going on.
Yeah.
Because your younger audience are more participants.
Not so stuffy as those old guys.
I think those days of being the stuffy English is moving away from it, because you know the society is changing, and a lot of your great hobbyists are on Instagram.
Absolutely,
and they're showing their tanks up.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, Yorkshire Reef, what's his name? Yorkshire Reef.
Oh yeah, Yorkshire Reef is Stefan.
Stefan.
What a lovely guy. Yeah.
Now, if there is someone that has the American attitude and mentality,
Yeah.
it's Stefan.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, he's English.
Yeah.
And he is out there.
Yeah.
He is forefront. And he is exciting. He's invigorating. He's enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And he's in the camera and having a great time.
Yeah.
And I think a guy like that is very influential to the industry, and the industry is evolving. One guy came up and said, I never heard of you until today, but I went and I bought your book right away because
We sold out.
Yeah, you sold out the book.
Yeah, I mean, we had some copies.
Who says books don't sell?
Exactly. I mean, well, I think that goes back to some of us realise that, even with our fantastic sort of phones and I think we've got access to whatever we want or information, sometimes you can never be sure that the information you're getting is 100%. Or it's someone else's opinion. And I always say to customers that are in store, if you are going to use the internet, take 5 people's opinions and then form your own opinion. Whereas at least with a book or a guide, and in the book, of course, there is a recipe sheet almost of how
Every
people.
single
I mean,
tank,
there was an average tank in there, wasn't there? My one.
There we go. This
but there's-
baby did appear in the book.
But there's a recipe sheet to the side, and it gives some consumers and customers and also sort of future hobbyists the idea that, well, that guy uses this type of lights, or this person or she uses those types of protein skimmer or whatever. So it's a good place, a good resource. But I think, books are still very much, they're not obviously the first thing that people grab. Like I said, it's usually a phone, but it's also something nice to keep as well. Something nice to keep.
Yeah, I hear that.
You see all the pictures on your phone, don't you? And then you forget about them, years pass.
And here's another interesting fact. I've heard from people who are in the industry say to me, "Oh, Tony, I can go on this website and see this tank or read about this." However, the book will always be there for you unless it gets damaged. But the book will always be there for you. But if AAC tomorrow goes out of business and doesn't pay for their website, all that information goes away.
Absolutely. I mean, this business.
Coca-Cola, if they don't pay for the website, all that information goes away.
Yeah.
So the same thing holds true.
Absolutely true.
Whereas with a book, you will always have that information.
Yeah.
And again, yes, the recipes will always be there because reef tanks from around the world is a chapter that has 38, 42 different tanks, and you can look at them, and if you say, I love this tank, this is how I want my tank to look, there's a recipe there on exactly how they got to that tank.
But it also, what's interesting as well with books, which makes it in some respects a little bit easier, is that say like you've got volume 1, which is how many years was it between volume 1 and volume 2? 11 years. And in that time, 11, which is good because it also shows you a transition of the way things change.
Oh, here we go. This is where it gets good. Explain.
I suddenly realised that no matter how many medias that you look at, so we're very lucky, so we have access to Triton's calcium reactor media, right? And that one has the lowest tested phosphate concentration.
Okay.
It's very expensive, but it is, you can actually, the most nutrient you'll get once it goes into calcium reactor is 0.09. But many of the other medias I was testing, like the reef bones that a lot of people use, the bits of coral gravel, or the other products that are out there in the marketplace. I won't name brand names, but there are quite a few popular ones. But when we were using them in calcium reactors, they were exhausting tons of phosphate into the water. Now, it's okay, again, if you're using a calcium reactor in combination with a Kaltwasser, as I was, because that will help precipitate some of that out, but it doesn't precipitate it all out.
No.
And then the problem was then you would then rush to change your GFO, your phosphate removing media, and you was always in this knife's edge of swinging up and down with nutrient levels. So I thought, well, and back then, really, dosing solutions weren't all that, is what I'm going to say. They're okay, the classic balling type methods and things are okay, but anything we're adding as a salt or a dosing compound to a tank is displacing the ionic balance over time.
Right.
However,
that's why the water changes were so critical.
Absolutely, and as we'll get onto that in a second, water changes, but I think that for me now, where we've got such great brands, and I'm going to name them all because rather than just spear marks, so it doesn't sound like I'm just promoting one. But this one does run on Zlements, this particular aquarium. But I'm also running the farm Modern Reef, which I know that you're going to go and visit Eurocorals next week.
Yes.
But Modern Reef, I've been incredibly impressed with actually as a dosing compound that ties in with dosing foods.
Right.
Of course, we've got the original, we've got the Triton method, which is still very popular amongst quite a few people. But there's another one that I've tried as well more recently as well. We're just experimenting and going back in some of the fauna marine with the colours and things like that. And so we're so lucky today that we've got a lot more thought process coupled with ICPs. So the ICP is what's changed in mine and your lifetime. I mean, that must be the biggest change. The fact that we've got access to chemistry that we never had before.
Yeah, but I tend to believe that we're kind of not using it properly still.
Well, it could be. I mean, a water change can solve a lot of problems without using it.
No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, for example, I tell everyone, when it comes to ICP, when your tank is at its best, do the ICP test. Forget about the parameters on the ICP test. Do the ICP test when your tank, you feel, looks its best. And when your tank goes south, that something happens to it, do another ICP test and you'll see the difference between the two and you realize where it went wrong. Because I noticed...
So there's no point doing an ICP when it's broken.
Well, no, when
you might as well. I mean, you're doing it.
Do it when it's great.
Doing it was great, and when it's broken.
And when it's broken, so you can compare the two and say, this is where I was at my best. This is where my problems are coming from. Because I realized that a lot of tanks require different chemistry because of the way the animals live in that tank. So I feel that where one coral is sucking up some kind of nutrient, in another tank that doesn't have that coral, that nutrient could be growing. Or that element could be growing and making the tank out of balance. You understand? So to me, I look at it as your fail-safe. Take it when it's best, and when it's bad, analyze it. So then that way you see where the differences are, where you need to make your corrections. Because anyone can tell you, hey, Paul, your calcium is low, or this is that, or this is that. Or you want to find heavy metals, right? You can always do that with your ICP. However, I suggest do it to monitor the system to see when it's failing you the most.
Well, I think that's why now I've sort of moved into the world of experimenting with more so with dosing and using, say, calcium reactors and things like that. Because, of course, we've got a good guide then. That's what I would say the ICP is. It's a good guide.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's given me the confidence to experiment again with this. And I'm quite happy with it. I mean, I'm seeing a much less rise in nutrient levels and things. Because I had the like the turbo style calcium reactors that have like the twin tech, like the Distacos and things.
Yeah.
Whereby the media,
great calcium reactors,
they're great, but there's a problem whereby that they're brewing the media constantly, and it depends on your demand. So one of the most important things, if you do use that type of calcium reactor, is to make sure really that it's perfectly sized for the job. And originally,
right, because the effluent, you can be putting in too much.
Absolutely.
Or not enough.
Yeah, well, the thing is,
and you have to monitor
they brew them. So that means that so in actual fact, the calcium reactor originally that I started was in that style. The Twin Tech was a big one, and it was wrong. It was too much effluent coming, too much phosphate-ridden effluent coming in.
Right.
So I scaled it right down to a small one. But even so, I'm very happy now with the idea of going down the avenue of dosing. And all the minor elements as well. I mean, that makes a hell of a difference.
Now, my thing about this is one of the reasons a lot of people did away with a two-part because it became too costly. Remember?
Well, there is that. I mean, this.
Right.
I'm not joking. It is an expensive route, but the way I look at it is, if my animals are happier, then I should do diligence good by looking after them properly. Well, I wouldn't call it pest-free because I don't believe you can have a system that's completely pest-free. Yeah, but there's Asterina starfish in there for certain. And I've had vermetid snails break out.
Oh yeah.
So this is by
so
no.
How did
This
you
is
get
by
rid of the snails?
well, the vermetid snails. I have to say, really, if you want to, you have to be industrial. And I have to go in there manually and crush them, and then the rats pick them out. But I also.
But what about in the areas you can't get to?
I've got around about sort of 40 bumblebee snails in there, which certainly keep the population lower.
Okay.
But have you noticed something actually that I don't know if I never used to remember seeing a lot of vermetid snails years ago, but we seem to see a lot more of them now.
Yeah.
I think that's down to the potentially the maricultured beds.
Probably.
Where the stone at the base, it may be something like that. I'm not sure, but we do seem to see certain things come in waves, if you like.
Yeah, like Aptasia.
Absolutely, yeah.
Aptasia has been a plague lately in Qatar, and what we've done to combat it is I went to Dubai and I met up with a friend where I picked up the Bergias.
Yes.
And sold them right away.
Yeah.
However, I kept some because I want them to. And sure enough, we got eggs and we're growing them. I think you should be doing the same thing.
Yeah, I really should, really. I've always.
And they're easy to breed.
Yeah, they are fairly easy to breed. One of the problems you got there is that a lot of people have fallen in love with wrasse species.
But so what I did was before I sold them and before I arrived in Qatar with the Bergias, because I went to pick them up personally, I put a whole detail on how to acclimate, when to acclimate, and how to put them in the tank, and when to put them in the tank. A whole thing, and I said, you must follow this. And one of my clients posted back, I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning doing what you suggested. Good.
Yeah.
Absolutely good.
It was probably a good time to put them in. Putting them in at night time is much better.
Yes, that was my suggestion.
Yeah.
And guess what? 3 weeks later, he's raving. I got no Aptasias anymore in the tank.
Because you don't often, because the truth is that from what feedback I get from customers, I mean, we have sold them a couple of times, but I've never had them always in stock. But the feedback I get is that you put them in, and unless you've got them in a small box, that you can see the Aptasia. You don't see them.
No.
They just all of a sudden.
Hide at night.
That's it. They all of a sudden they just see less Aptasia, and that's
right. So what happened was the customer raves, "Oh, my tank is Aptasia free. Now I'm afraid that they're going to starve." So my reply was, well, I have a farm of Aptasia because I grow Aptasia.
I remember you've got a little tank that you've got set up. You allow it for the copper band butterflies and for anything.
So I said to him, I'll sell you some Aptasias. So I created a demand. So we find ingenious ways to do these things. But you're right. You put them in and you're afraid that the Bergias are going to get picked out. But they're smart. They're not stupid. They come out at nighttime. They hide really well. And in live rock, they can hide inside the live rock and come out when they need to at nighttime. You have a lovely store here. You have more inventory than anyone I know. So, if I came in and I did an inventory, I would say that all your money is tied up in inventory.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a spender.
Yeah, but you carry all high-line stuff, great products.
Now, I like the idea that if someone comes in and, you don't want to wait for it anymore. No one wants to wait for goods anymore.
No, and you can't blame them.
No.
You can't blame them, because in today's world, you get online and you say, here it is, and in 2 or 3 days later, you have it at your doorstep.
Absolutely.
But in an emergency, that does not work.
No.
So, however, you're able to provide your customer in an emergency, their pump goes down, you have it in stock.
We carry also. We don't just carry sort of one particular brand. We're very fair in the sense that, I mean, it would be easy if I just stuck with one company's ethos and just kept that particular product range, for example, whether it be electricals or consumables.
Right.
But the reason why I do that is that I don't like to dictate. There are people, for example, that will walk in, that have been used to using a particular brand for a number of years. I'm not about to tell them that they should be buying this brand. I want them to come in and feel like it's an independent experience. If they ask our opinion, we'll give them our opinion.
Sure.
But there's a lot of people out there that ultimately want what they want, and therefore you've got to give them it. And the first rule I was ever told in business is give the customers what they want.
Yes.
So if someone comes in today and they want a Royal exclusive Bubble King skimmer, I'll have it. I might not have every model, but I've certainly got enough to get people buy up to about 2,000 litres. Beyond that, we would do a special order.
Right.
On things like on the... but then likewise, we'll have a budget skimmer as well, because we try and cater for everybody. We're not here to just sell the top end equipment.
In business, it's always to have good, better, and best.
Yeah, I mean, we stock a lot of the very popular sort of Chinese models, all the way up through to some of the more German superior sort of stuff. And also the other thing is the other thing I think gives customers confidence is that we use it all. So this tank, for example, is running at a high-end sort of equipment level, Bubble King and Deltec Aquarium and Neptune and Trident and Alcatronics, all of the toys that anyone could ever want, as an example. Right. Likewise, other displays around the store, like the small nano tank on the counter over there.
I saw that.
It's got no skimmer.
Oh my God!
No skimmer. It's got 2 cheap LEDs that are no more than £30 each for it. So we want to be able to show people that you can enjoy the hobby at any level.
Economical reef.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, I'd say that's more economical than yours.
Hey, but look, hey, mine is really cheap. It's an Aqua L tank.
Yeah.
With a hang on the back filter.
But you know something? I bet you're the same. Doing these basic systems brings me more. I know when we look at that, I'll get people drive all over the country to come and see that.
Yes.
But actually, doing those basic tanks with little or nothing is somewhat more fun.
They are, because
you have to use this.
Well, yeah,
rather than toys.
Right, because remember, salinity fluctuations are greater in a small tank because the evaporation.
Yeah.
Right? So the swing is greater, whereas here is displaced easier.
Yeah.
Right? It's not as dramatic as on a little tank. So the evaporation is one thing. Plus the chemical balance of everything. If it's loaded with corals, they're sucking up so much nutrients and so much.
Yeah, I think it's nice when as I said, it's nice to be able to go back to, certainly for me, because my background was fairly meagre. Everything, when I started out in life, there wasn't a lot of money around. And I think that's similar for you as well. You started similar. And we had to make...
still similar.
Yeah, we had to make use of what we were given. In fact, my first ever saltwater aquarium was actually given to me.
Wow.
I was very heavily... I was already working in the industry. I was probably around about 18. So 16, I had a Saturday job. Yeah, like a lot of people come into the industry in a local freshwater store. And then around about sort of 18 years old, I knew some bikers in the town, and they used to refer to me as Paul the Fish. And I used to help them with their African cichlids, their Tanganyikan cichlid displays and planted displays, and they could see the enthusiasm I had. And then one day, one of those bikers came up to me and said, "I've got something for you." And he gave me the first ever. It was only 2 foot. It wasn't very expensive, but it was like you would imagine, under gravel filtered with coral gravel in it and layers of sand with gravel tidies. And he gave me this little tank with a pair of clownfish, a mushroom rock, and a piece of live rock. It was very basic. I wish I had a photo of it.
What year was this?
Oh, well, that was when I was 18 and I am 54 now. I'll let you do the maths.
No, you should know 18, what year it was.
Oh, I can't remember.
Because...
so that would have been 1988.
See,
yeah,
that's my point.
Yeah.
Because I know if someone said to me, what year were you 33 years old? I know exactly what year it was.
Yeah, but you know what? I spent a lot of time at music festivals years ago.
Oh, I spend a lot of time in discotheques spinning records. And the boom, boom, boom.
My memory's fading. No, but I was.
You need to eat more fat content.
It was 1988, and I was given this tank.
Nice.
And I remember getting it. I was so excited. I was with Angela by this point as well. We had our first flat and what have you. And I went home. Angela, I drove her nuts. I mean, we already had. I'll give you an idea. My first front room in our first flat, I had a 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot brackish water aquarium. I had 2 3-foot freshwater aquariums in the same room, and a 4 by 2 by 2 cichlid, Central American cichlid aquarium.
Oh my God!
In my spare room, I had a 5 by 2 by 2 Tanganyikan aquarium.
Oh my God!
In my hallway, I had a South American dwarf cichlid planted system. In my bedroom, I had a pair of Aquadens rivellatus green terrors breeding, and then I let Angela know I've got another one.
Angela.
Yeah,
I sympathise with you now.
Yeah. So I drove her absolutely crazy. But I come home with this little saltwater tank, and I was fascinated by the fact because it only had 2 tubes. It had a blue actinic tube
and the white.
And the white. That's all it had.
Yeah.
And I put it on the side. I was so excited by it, and I watched it, and I never stopped watching it, this tank. And then one morning, a few weeks after, I wake up and I go, oh, look at that! Out of the live rock, there grew this beautiful little brown anemone.
Aptasia.
Yeah.
and you were like, oh.
Yeah. So I rang up a few people. I said, I've got something's grown up in live rock. I wasn't sure what it was. And then, of course, there was no, I didn't know. I was late starting with mobile phones. I had no mobile phone. So it wasn't like you could share a picture.
No.
I had to describe it on the phone, on the landline phone. So somebody went, I think that might be a pest. That was the first time I learned about, there's a lot to learn about this hobby. And I think just from those early beginnings with salt water, that's what actually did it for me. And if you look at everything I've done over the years, particularly with fish, I mean, every day's a school day with a reef aquarium.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And with evolving technology.
Yeah. But fish, I mean, learning about the how to get fish good is probably the biggest thing, I think, for me. That's what keeps me going. Now, of course, you've seen, as I've shown you around, that I'm going on a new route now with a little bit more aquaculture in my life with the seahorses and the corals. And I think I was about, within that age, from 18 to 22, the first thing I saw that really, really perpetuated this marine adventure, if you like, was I was on the internet, which was relatively new, like to me anyway, because I wasn't using it for much. Yeah. Right. And I saw this thing called, which would be familiar to you, Geothermal Research Foundation.
Yes. Yes.
And Garth,
I know exactly
in the USA, was the first ever place that was really cultivating soft corals. So I saw this guy cutting the top off of a toadstool coral and cutting it into pie sections, and then that was it. I was hooked with corals.
And then that section they cut off, that stalk, grew a new head.
Well, I do this all the time, even on some of the willow type and the green. Even to this day, I'm still doing it. But as I said, that was the point where, from the aquaculture side of things, that has really kept me going, really. But of course, the problem I had was, although I had a day job and I was working sort of part-time for a bit as well, the problem I had was I kept running out of money. Because as you can imagine, with all those aquariums, all I was ever doing, I remember sneaking test kits home without Angela knowing and things like that. It was getting out of hand, basically. It was an addiction by this point, you know. So I thought, how can I get round this? And here we are today. So it was almost like the love for the hobby. I believed in the spirit and went down this avenue of starting my own retail store. And that was actually only open a few days a week initially. And that's at Unit 4, which is right at the very end where the little farm is now. So that tiny little space was my first ever attempt at retail.
Right.
Then, of course, it got quite really popular. I was very lucky. I mean, we used to have, I mean, it's so small, you've seen the space, but, you know, on a Saturday, I could have like 50, 60 people coming in, and we were all like this.
Cramped.
Yeah, so, and I started to get known for doing the SPS frags and things like that. And then this other unit came up, this half of it now, this side. And then eventually I took on that one, and now I've got that one, that one, that one, and that one. But I think I'm done now.
Okay.
I'm not going any further with it.
So tell us a little bit about that one, the new one.
The new one.
Yes.
Yeah. So the new one. So obviously now I'm going to be honest. I'm getting a little bit tired. I've done 36 years of retail, and
You think so?
yeah. And I'm not saying
We'll see that. Watch. You'll be here forever.
I'm not saying I'm running away, but I feel like now I need to start laying down the foundations of my departure from the industry.
Well, you are tutoring your son along the path.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's and whatever happens, I will always make sure the AAC spirit remains. Yeah,
Right.
but ultimately, you know, Angela and I, we need a bit more time out now. You know, but I've also just built with Unit 5 what I call my new space. And my new space is really about trying to bring a love of aquaculture back into my life. I get so bogged down with all the administration and all the other things that I want to try and revitalise myself a bit with being more involved with the animals, if you like, yeah. So I'm doing, I've just recently learned a little bit of seahorse culturing, just to basically get the fundamental basics of aquaculture.
Well, I mean, you're doing a great job with the seahorses.
We've got several hundred on the grow. And,
You're going to be selling them to the other shops.
No, I'm currently not. I'm currently now, at the moment, I'm just selling them.
Jamie had a whole bunch in his place.
Yeah, they will probably come via the person I sell them to. So, for example, TMC are now having those, and we do a few ourselves in store. But no, at the moment, I'm just keeping it nice and simple like that. And really, it's really not so much about making money from the seals. It's about re-educating myself. Because all of my life, I've sold life. What I want to do now is bring life.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is where I'm going. So there's nothing better to start with marine aquaculture from a fish perspective than seahorses.
Right.
Because seahorses are, if you like, the guppies of the marine world. They're relatively straightforward to breed. Their food sizing as newborns is quite sizable, a norpali, quite size. The brine shrimp, Artemia. Yeah, but of course, once you get into what sort of things that like some of these fish breeders do, like Tom Verhoeven and Karen Britton and all these people, they're culturing plankton, which is way more difficult.
They're culturing copepods.
Yeah, well, also
mysis.
Yeah, but they're also culturing things that are you can barely see with the eye.
Yeah, rotifers.
And small
photoplankton.
Yeah. So at the moment, I'm just learning a new craft, and of course, I'm going to bring the aquaculture more forward into the business. And the other reason is I want to start the online coral business that I was telling you about as well.
Okay. What parting words would you have for our audience? What would you say to them to either provide them with guidance or encouragement? What would you say?
Right. I think
them?
one of the most important things of all, at any level of reef keeping, accept the limitations of the system that you have. I see too many people getting upset when things go wrong. And the way I look at this is that what I mean by accepting the limitations. So, You know, very often I see people that may not have the same level of income as someone else who can afford all the bits and pieces, you know, for their reef tank. You know, just accept what you have and enjoy the animals for what they are. So, in other words, you know, there's, you know, at the moment there seems to be this race to have the brightest stony coral reef aquarium on the planet. But that's a difficult subject. That's to require such dedication. Just accept that all of the animals that are available to the hobby all have their place.
Exactly.
All right.
And they all don't have their place in one system.
Absolutely.
Sometimes.
Although I try it.
Yeah. You try. And marvelous tank.
Yeah.
Paul,
Thank
you so much.
Excellent. Lovely to talk to you, Tony.
For not only being part of the Reef Chronicles, but also for being a pillar in your community here in the UK. Everyone knows who you are. You're tenacious. You're amazing. And I really appreciate everything you've done for the hobby. I really appreciate everything you've done for me. You sell my book like nobody else, and I appreciate that. So thank you so much. And for you out there, I hope you learned something today, because this man had so much to share with us. So, from VargasReef Chronicles, Tony is saying, watch this next video, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Tony.
You have to love reefing.